Hello, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder, the podcast where we get nosy and speak to some of our favourite artists, musicians or bands about what they've got up to between tours in order to survive, whatever that might mean in their case. I'm so excited to welcome Raymond McGinley, guitarist of legendary Glasgow band Teenage Fanclub, to the show. Sorry, Bells Hill. Of course, you're probably listening to this thinking he probably hasn't had to work many jobs between tours, apart from one near miss of almost digging a tunnel to France. So I'll leave you to it. We chat a lot about their new record, Endless Arcade. You know, I'm not shy about using this show to speak to bands that I love and ask them about things that I find fascinating. Teenage Fanclub's new record, Endless Arcade, is coming out on the 30th of April. This is I'm More Inclined behind this. It's sounding amazing. I'm really looking forward to the record and looking forward to seeing them play eventually. East London's Signature Brew are the official beer of the podcast. They've made beers with Mastodon, Idols, Slaves, Sports Team and a whole bunch of other bands. If you live in the UK, you can get beers from their website delivered directly to your door. signaturebrew.co.uk for that. And with the voucher code 101podcast, all capital letters, you can get 10% off your order. Here's Raymond McGinley of Teenage Fanclub. Go well. Cheers!
I mean, I was lucky. As a band, we were lucky to buy guitars in the 80s. And I bought two guitars in the middle of the 80s when I was a student. When I had more sense later on, when I thought, okay, I shouldn't have bought that Yamaha. I want to buy a real guitar. By a real guitar, I was thinking like a vintage 60s guitar. So I bought a Fender Jaguar in 1963. Again, it's kind of boring, nerdy stuff or whatever. But out of an advert in Sounds of Melody Maker, a place called Guitar Player in Rochdale, and it was £290 or something. I bought it mail order, and this thing turned up, and I bought this guitar. I sold the crap Yamaha one I'd had, and I bought a proper guitar. And I bought that because I had a student grant, and I could buy a guitar, and it was 200 and odd quid. And I still use that guitar. And then,
really,
yeah, all the time. And then the other guitar that we use all the time as a band, and I still use. After I left university, I was on the dole because I'd made a conscious decision. And this is how long ago it was I left university. They were building the Channel Tunnel at the time.
Wow.
And I got offered a job. I'd studied engineering at University of Glasgow. I got a degree. And I got a job offer working on the Channel Tunnel.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what? I kind of want to be in a band. If I get a job, I'm never going to do this band thing. So I'm just going to go on the dole, because otherwise I'll never do it.
What year was that?
That was in 1985.
And was that during the Boy Hairdressers?
Well, this is pre the Boy Hairdressers. So 1985, I had this idea that I wanted to be in a band, but I wasn't. I was in a band with a couple of other mates, but time a guy called Ross Sinclair, who's now a professor of art at Glasgow School of Art, and my other friend Neil Mengus. I kind of wanted to do something else, and that we weren't really doing much for that band. I wanted to do something else. So 85, 86, there was a lot of stuff happening in Glasgow. There was a club called Splash One, run by various people, including some people from Primal Scream, like Bobby Gillespie, and met a lot of people around about that time, including people like Norman Blake, that I'm now in a band with, and lots of other people. And they brought lots of bands to Glasgow. Let's saw Sonic Youth for the first time, and Primal Scream played there, and Wire played there, and the Mary Chain and stuff. So it's kind of wanting to be in a band and join a band and do that kind of stuff. So I knew the guys in Primal Scream at that time. The band then was kind of different than the band is now. This was been around a while, and I had this Fender. I'd bought like a Fender Twin amp, but I'd seen this other guitar for sale, an 60s Epiphone Casino.
Yeah.
And the guys in Primal Scream had borrowed my amp to go on tour, and they said, "Oh, we'll buy that amp off you. We'll give you 300 quid for it." So I thought, oh, that's great. So I'd kind of had the £300 in my already, I kind of owned the £300. I was on the dole at the time. I was in a flat and I shared a flat with two other people. And the rent for the flat, the monthly rent for the flat was £300. And I had their rent that I was going to use to pay the other two people in the flat that I was going to pay the rent with. And I also had my £100 share, which I got as housing benefit at the time because I was on the dole. So they just sent me the money and I cashed it. So I had this £300 and I saw a guitar in the paper, Epiphone Casino, 1960s. And I thought, well, Primal Scream are buying an amp. I'll go and have a look at this Epiphone. And I went to look at this guitar near where the flat was. The guy opened the case and I thought, oh, it was like that moment when there's some scene in Pulp Fiction where they kind of open a briefcase and there's a kind of glow or something, and you kind of not quite sure what. It was a bit like that, and I thought, yeah, that looks great, and I'm trying to not look impressed. So anyway, I buy this guitar with a £300 because I'm going to get the £300 off of Primal Scream or buying the amp. But then I took the guitar back, and then my mate Stuart May, who was in Primal Scream at the time, said, "Oh, we're not going to buy that amp anymore. We got something else."
Oh, no.
So I was kind of in a hole, but I can't remember what I did. But I've got a memory. I had a bit of a diet at that point, which was probably eating like pasta with like brown sauce or something, and just surviving what was in the cupboard for a month or something. But I'm glad that happened because those two guitars, the Epiphone Casino and the Fender Jaguar, they became me and Norman's guitars in the Boy Hairdressers. Norman used the Casino and I used the Fender Jaguar. And we still use those two guitars now, and we use those guitars extensively on the new record we got coming out, Endless Arcade. We're still using them.
That's brilliant. I mean, they're so synonymous to your sound, those guitars.
Well, people say to me, is that the same guitar you had in the Boy Hairdressers? I was like, yeah, but those are the two same guitars we had in the Boy Hairdressers,
Brilliant.
And one was bought when I was a student and the other one was bought when I was in the dole, when I kind of had no money and kind of got these things. And we bought all these other things afterwards, pre-internet days when bargains still existed. And but we still use these things that we had back then. And it feels great to be somehow connected. And I can see a picture because I saw somebody showed me a picture recently of the Boy Hairdressers, a band me and Norman and Francis, our drummer, were in before Teenage Fan Club. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, yeah, look, it's the same guitars. Stop using.
That's great.
And I just love that kind of continuity of using the same instruments and use them all the way through, and all sorts of different sounding records as well.
Totally. And I'm glad you brought up Endless Arcade. Of course, that's why I'm able to chat to you today. It's coming out on the 30th of April.
Yeah.
And the two singles that have come out, the videos that have come out with them, especially I'm More Inclined, which is, footage from recording that in Hamburg. It struck me how fun it looked for you. Sort of had it's got this real effortless charm. Did it feel like that?
Yeah, but I mean, also it felt great being in the studio. I mean, it's kind of being in the studio always feels like a treat. And even though it's been a long time I haven't been in the studio, it still feels exciting to be making new stuff for the first time. But I suppose also looking at the video of us, and the video from More Inclined has got us recording the song in the studio at the time. It looks extra interesting now because it's like, remember that, people hanging over each other, listening to, because that was just before the lockdown thing happened. And it just it has a bit of extra resonance about it, but it's good as well to have done a video thing because that's just a record of us doing that in the, actually doing it for real, because it seems like better than any conceptual video or whatever, you end up doing these things and you're doing it and you think, well, what are we doing here? This seems a bit silly,
Teenage Fan Club has always struck me as the kind of band that would, much rather make records than music videos.
Well, yeah, by times a million or whatever, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so if we can just make the music, because we're kind of thinking we did that. We're thinking, do we ever need to make a music video again? Maybe we just get, because we know a friend of ours and photographer Donald Milne who filmed that, and we've done stuff with him for years, and he's great. And we think, well, let's just get Donald in the studio. Anything else would do it, and we'll just get him to film it. Then we won't have to think about making a
Mm, mm.
making a music video again. We'll just do it. I think people like to see people actually doing things for real than some kind of conceptual or a band pretending to be a band, which is a lot of music videos are people acting and playing themselves in a role, and somehow it just looks a bit stiff.
Yeah, yeah, totally. At what point do you decide that you're gonna, start booking in studio time? After how many songs have you and Norman written, together or separately, where you sort of call each other and think, let's get some studio time booked in?
Well, I think sometimes it works kind of both, that way around, and sometimes it works the other way around as well. And this has kind of always been the case, I think, with the band. There's something about booking the studio that's really inspiring as well.
Mm.
You got some ideas, but it's more you make the decision to think, let's make a record, and then you book the time, and as soon as you booked it, you see this thing on the horizon, which is you're going to go there and make the record, and having that the reality of having songs to make a record instead of just, I don't think any of us are the kind of people that just walk around and see ourselves as songwriters or whatever as a kind of lifestyle or something. We like to write songs because we want to make records, and we want it to be something that we play on stage and it becomes a real thing, and it's not just something we do every day. I think we like to have a reason to write songs or finish a song. You've always got ideas floating about and little snippets of things that you're trying to. Certainly for me, I'll sit and play the guitar, and I'm thinking, what are the things I've got floating around in my head, and I'm kind of really guilty of not recording any demos. I just kind of have to try and wrangle them out of my brain. But for us, I think the point of really knowing we're going to make a record is when we book the studio, because it's like then as a band we all agree, is everyone available? Can we do this thing? We're going to do this, and like whether it's like next week or in 4 months or whatever. Once it becomes a reality, then it feels really exciting because that you're sitting working on a song not just as a self-indulgent exercise apropos of nothing. You're doing it because you've got a destination for it, and it's actually something you're going to work with other people, and it's going to become a reality. And the pressure is good as well to have to know that you need to finish an idea and turn an idea into a song, because that you might play in front of other people or that you might work on together. Because you can have a million ideas, unfinished ideas, but turning it into something that's going to come out to something that you might feel like you're going to suggest that other people in the world might pay any attention to. It's a different kind of thing. And I think we need the reality of knowing that we're going to actually go into the studio and do it to take us over to actually finish the songs.
Do you get inspiration from when you booked the studio time in Hamburg? Of course, there's so much Beatles stuff around that, and not only the Beatles, but John Lennon's last record. It was the same mixing desk used on that. When you booked that, did that add a kind of inspiration in the way that you could kind of envision the record sounding or feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hamburg, the first time as a band, Teenage Fanclub ever went to Hamburg was in 1990, and we were putting out a single, which is a cover, a pretty, you know, raucous, to put it mildly, version of the Ballad of John and Yoko that we were releasing, that was going to be released on, and for some reason, I think it was going to be what would have been John Lennon's 50th birthday. And we were in Hamburg at that time, just coincidentally playing our first show in Hamburg on the Reeperbahn.
Brilliant.
So I don't think anyone can really think. Well, I'm sure anyone that's into music finds it hard to think of Hamburg or to be in Hamburg without thinking about the Beatles. And also just lots of people. You think, what it would have been like Little Richard or something playing in Hamburg or something, with Jimi Hendrix playing guitar or whatever, and all that, what that would have been like at that time. And there's still remnants of that atmosphere left, So I think the city does have that kind of resonance or whatever that's still there, But
Yeah.
also we like Hamburg in other kind of ways as well. It seems it's kind of just an industrial or ex-industrial city, Northern European. There's certain parallels with Glasgow, and but for
Mm.
whatever reason, we like it there. And it feels like a place that makes sense for us to make a record there.
That's funny you say about Northern Britain. Actually, I didn't connect that because the docks in Hamburg, they're pretty brutal looking, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose maybe one of the differences between the docks in Hamburg and the docks in Glasgow is that the docks in Hamburg exist a lot more than the docks
Yeah.
here in Glasgow do. It still feels, I mean, not that would I know, but industry in Hamburg, I don't know anything. I have no idea. So, don't, someone in Hamburg's listening to this and thinking, "What are you talking about? Shut up!"
I'm with you.
But just as a kind of, a city that has there are some kind of similarities of, between Glasgow and Hamburg. Not completely, but it's a city we've always liked. We've felt comfortable there. We
Yeah.
felt like it makes sense for us to be creative there. We like it.
In the press release, sort of the main quote is from you about the title of Endless Arcade, saying, you think of an endless arcade as an imaginary one that goes on forever, and you always, I took that personally as the real life. You're always going to be surprised. You're going to go through some twists and turns. Is that maybe subconsciously a reflection of being in a band for so long?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose everyone. I suppose all we know as people that have been in a band is we see life as being in a band. And it's a kind of stupid thing to say, but I think everyone, whatever they do, has their own. Everyone's lives have. I mean, I suppose we have chosen to live a life that's, I wouldn't call it precarious, but the thing I like about doing what we do is there's no guarantee that it's going to last any longer than what you're doing now. And I think personally, I've always liked the idea of a lack of, it's like 30 years in or whatever, you can look back on it, but you can't look forward on it as a career or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
And I've always thought, well, we'll do this record and then see what happens after that. I think as a band, we'd never have a presumption that just because we made a record that people are necessarily going to like it. We have to satisfy ourselves first, and there's all sorts of stuff in the world that people can look at or listen to or do or whatever, instead of listening or giving any time to our music. There's a million distractions out there. I've got no preconception of whether people will interact with what we do or not. So it could be, as this charmed life that we've led, doing this thing, this self-indulgent thing all these years, it could come to an end at any time, and I've thought that for 30 years or more than 30 years that I've been doing this thing. We all think that.
Have you been quite good at staving off any, anxiety or neurosis that might offer?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I like, as an individual, I like not knowing what's around the corner. Uncertainty feels comfortable to me. And I don't really know why that is. But you're kind of going back to the album title of Endless Arcade and thinking of that as a kind of, a thing of, a kind of a way of describing life or whatever. I think it was like, I was doing the vocal for the song of that, and I kind of written out lyrics and we're talking about I don't even have a title for the song necessarily at that point. And I think, well, I think the song's going to be called Endless Arcade. And it was Norman that said, Endless Arcade would be a good title for the album, and Norman suggested that as a title for the album. There's a song called Endless Arcade on the album, and but the two things don't necessarily need to, it's not like, just the title seems to reflect this collection of songs that we had, and that was Norman's idea, even though I wrote that song. But it's not like, somehow you have something that seems to make some sense to you or to us, that's not a literal thing. And that moment of thinking that would be a good thing for the album, that kind of happened in like 5 seconds or whatever from Norman maybe listened to the song and I had the lyrics and he was like, well, what are you going to call it? Endless Arcade? Well, yeah, I think I'll call the song Endless Arcade. Yeah, well, that'd be a good thing for the album. And that's it, that moment is done,
Something quite magical about, I suppose that's like writing a riff, you might write something in 5 minutes and then that's going to be with you for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And any kind of moment of creativity, or sometimes you have to remind yourself that, I think, and I'm talking to this isn't advice to other people, I'm talking to myself here. You have to remind yourself that things can be simple, that you might get caught up in thinking, oh, it's all so complicated and I need to do this and I need to do that. And, you can get, sometimes you do need to remind yourself that to try and see the simplicity and what's in front of you, whatever it is you need to do, whether it's making a record or making your dinner, like it's all an enjoyable process that it can be, I mean, as I say, I've lived a pretty charmed life, other people have lived much, because the thing I've always thought is sometimes, people in bands have a bit of a reputation for being whingers, and and people are like, oh God, we need to go and do this, and I need to get up at 6 a.m. because we got a flight to, wherever, we need to, we need to fly to Spain at 6 a.m. Oh my God, that's terrible. You're up at 6 a.m. You're in a taxi and you see like those guys standing on the slip road at the motorway, waiting for a van to come and pick them up, to take them to some site, working God knows where, doing God knows what. You think, those guys are there every morning. They don't know what they're doing day to day, It's like, we've got nothing to complain about.
It's funny that, your lives are so, you never really know what's around the corner or, what's ahead of you. Because from a fan's point of view, Teenage Fan Club, lots and lots and lots of people, Teenage Fan Club has remained a constant in their lives. We can rely on the fact that you're going to release another record. It's a wonderful feeling.
I mean, it's reassuring to, it's always reassuring to meet people and interact with people that, tell you. And the frustrating thing for us a bit on this new record is there's a kind of cycle of process of making a record. And to me, the end of that cycle is you go and play some shows and you meet people after a show and they say, oh yeah, I got the new record, I really like it, I like this song or that song, and you meet the people for whom this thing that we've done means something to them, and at that point you feel like the thing that you've been doing kind of obsessively, just as a kind of battle between you and your own expectations of what you might do, is kind of finished because it's gone. You've kind of seen it go into the world, and people have taken it into their life and use music as the way people use music to, the way we all use music or whatever to help us with our lives or whatever, and the frustrating thing now is I don't know when we're going to get that moment when we go back out on tour again and, so it's a bit frustrating at the moment because usually we'd be thinking, oh, we're going to go and play those shows in a month or two, and we don't know what's going to happen, and it feels kind of strange to us because we've all seen that point of when we finish the record and then the record comes out and then we go out and we tour. That's all part of the creative process, and we get to the, and we move into that other thing where we're out in front of people and it happens every day, and you move on from city to city, and all the rest of it is part of the thing that we've always enjoyed. And I suppose at the moment we're missing that final piece, but hopefully we'll get there before too long.
And it's coming out on Merge in the States, at least. It's
on Merge in the States and our own label, Pima, and UK and Europe and everywhere else,
And Merge, I'm a big Superchunk fan, and so Merge Records, as far as I understand it, was born out of Superchunk needing a record label to put out, putting out their own 7-inches. And there are a lot of similarities for me between you and Superchunk, especially what you were just saying then a little bit earlier about how, you don't necessarily walk around thinking that you're songwriters, but it's certainly something that you're brilliant at and give off a kind of inviting vibe about. You know, I think Superchunk has that as well.
Well, we first met Superchunk in 1990. We were in New York, and we were label mates on Matador. So we first met them, hung out with them then. So we've known Superchunk and Mac and Laura Merge and everything. That's 31 years ago.
Wow.
So we've known each other a long time, and we totally respect the fact that they're people that did what they do out of a necessity to, it starts off, you do the label not as a grand ego project, but as just something that is you need in your life to get from A to B or whatever,
Yeah.
And they're great people. We love working with them. We've been working with, we've known them. I say we've known Mac and Laura for 31 years or whatever, and we've been working with them as our label North America for now 15, 16 years or so.
Wow.
And it's great. We've gone really well. And all the other people that work there, they're a great bunch of people.
Think back to 1990 and the band formed in 89. You said, you're in a couple of bands before that. I mean, at what point, has there ever been a point where you've looked at like what you do and you realized, oh, this is my job now. I'm never going to have to look for another job.
Well, the idea of being in a band, it doesn't quite. It is definitely, this is what I do. I've never had a job doing anything else other than being a paper boy. I was a paper boy, then I was a student, then I was on the dole, and then I was finally got to make some money surviving being in a band. So I don't know anything else. So this is what I do, but I don't have any expectation that it's going to continue. But it has continued for a long time. But God knows what I'd do if I wasn't doing this. I've no idea. I don't know anything else.
How are you feeling about, this sort of subject, during the Creation Records years? Did it feel like it could end at any time? What was the feeling?
All the way through being in a band, I've always thought, oh, this could be the last record we make. This could be the last, if I've been in Tokyo or I've been in Sydney, Australia or wherever, I'll always think, this could be the last time I'm here because it might not happen next time, So every way along the way, it's not like I'm thinking, oh God, this is all so tiresome. Here we are again, whatever. I think, well, this could be the last time I do this, and I've been thinking that for 30 years. This could be the last time, I can't imagine never stopping making recording music because it's easier to do now, or playing music or playing the guitar, but doing it and anyone else in the world being interested in it is something I've never had any, presumed that would happen. But it's definitely, undeniably, this is what we do for a living. But I think, we'd only want to continue doing it. And I think for all of us, if it's, you don't want to do anything, to do with a band. It's like doing this and leading a dignified existence as well. And trying to do both those things to feel like you feel proud of it, creatively, artistically or whatever, and to be able to try and survive doing it and keep those two things going. But for me, one is the other, because as soon as you start to think of, oh, maybe I'll just do that, there has to be a reason for doing anything other than just money. If there isn't a reason other than that, then you shouldn't do it, I suppose. Or if anything feels instinctively in any little way that it feels a bit wrong or whatever, it feels the only mistake I think you ever make doing this kind of thing is to do something against your own instincts. So I think maybe what keeps us going is we try to, always have a reason for doing something beyond it just being what we do for a living.
Do you think the songs, the style of songs and, the lyrics, help, push you up in keeping a kind of, I suppose, positive mentality on that? For me, Everything Flows, that song's helped me get through some really hard times in my life of uncertainty and not knowing what's going to happen because, after listening to that song, I was looking up, flow theory and getting into that stuff and kind of understanding energy in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Everything Flows is a great song, and we've been playing that for a long time. And I can remember back to when Norman phoned me, and this would have been 1988, 89, and said, "Oh, I've written this song. I think it sounds pretty good," or whatever. I can't remember what he said. Actually, Norman probably wouldn't have said, "I think it sounds pretty good." He probably said, "Oh yeah, I think it's okay. Listen to this." And I went round and listened to it, and kind of thinking, "Yeah, this is good," But again, as you're saying, it's having it's like some kind of positivity that isn't some kind of cliched sense of
Yeah.
new age therapy positivity in inverted commas or whatever,
Yeah. It's natural.
Yeah, I think it's natural as well, and I think it's more useful to your friends or people around you or people that you love or whatever to try to be a bit optimistic, or to help the people around you in some kind of way, and and not just be, I think all of us get into things where you become a big self-indulgent downer about everything, and it's hard to see your way out of it, and it does take music or the people around you to bring you back out of that. But it is, I think, and again, in the band or whatever, we don't talk about, it's not like I've ever had a conversation about the song Everything Flows, about the lyrics or anything, ever.
Really?
Never once have we discussed this song. We just kind of, someone does something and we just let it in and we accept it for what it is, but we don't talk about it in
so
any
funny.
kind of overt way at all.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a conversation with Norman about the lyrics and Everything Flows, ever.
What about lyrics on Endless Arcade? Was there much chat about that?
No, not really. I mean, again, we just kind of, sometimes the first we'll hear the lyrics is because we kind of try and have some kind of vocal thing going when we're recording the song, but not fully formed and not with all the words on it. You might have a few, you might have a bit of a chorus, but we never sit down and talk to each other. We just kind of do that. We just kind of do it, and then everyone else reacts to it. But we don't have a literal reflective analysis of anything ever, and we never have. It's not like, yeah, that sounds interesting. What's that song about? Or what's that? Yeah, that bit, that sounds, we just kind of don't really do it, So we'll be there, and Norman's going to do his vocal, and we're there, Norman sings the vocal, and we hear the whole thing for the first time, maybe in that moment, unless it's been something we've rehearsed more extensively before, but there's maybe a moment when you hear the whole thing,
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it. We don't analyze it. You just kind of accept it,
I've read in the past that you were sort of the band's de facto manager. And there was a great Guardian article I read from a few years ago where you talked about, I think it was Bandwagon-esque, and you were speaking to a lawyer in the US, and you were in your folks' home in Glasgow, and there was a real kind of paradox between the two worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I can, because again, it wasn't like you got a group of people, and you've always got some kind of, hesitate to use the word dynamic or whatever that happens between any group of people, but it's just a kind of natural thing. People elect, you get different people that'll take interest in different things, and for whatever reason, I was the one that might have dealt with more of the business side of things. But it probably started with me. There'd be me and Norman, and I'd be the one that phoned the studio to book it or whatever, and it kind of starts from there.
Yeah.
You just go, oh, I'll do that. I'll book that van or whatever. So it ends up with, you get a slightly ridiculous situation where suddenly we go to New York for the first time in 1990, and suddenly people get interested in the band, and major labels start getting interested in the band, and somehow these mad guys went to New York. We got an advance from Matador Records of like a very, very small advance. I can't remember what it was, $1,500. We bought it on flights to go to New York and play some shows in North America,
Mm.
which people wouldn't do because it's not necessarily sensible. But we weren't really interested in what was sensible. We wanted to just go out and live our lives and experience things.
Great.
But because we did that, I think people thought, who are these guys that are just here apropos of nothing? Really. And people back in the UK would look suddenly thought, who are those guys that they're getting this press in North America? The normal way, the line of UK bands is you wait, you get a bigger deal in the UK, you become a band, you go to America when you're all jaded in a limo, then you're really grumpy and everyone in North America hates you, which is usual kind of, then you go back home and you bitch about America, because you're not as successful there as you are in the UK,
Yeah.
whatever the kind of normal, the way it's meant to work out. Where we just kind of went there the same way and sleeping on people's floors and driving around and doing all sorts of mad stuff the same way as we were here. We just kind of behaved the same way there as here.
Brilliant.
And people seem to feel quite. But anyway, cut a very long story short, we end up speaking to people that are interested in signing the band. So we're kind of like, oh, what's this all about, So we ended up getting a lawyer in New York, a guy called Richard Grable. He's a really cool guy. He was like Sonic Youth's lawyer and Don Fleming and stuff. And he represented us. So suddenly I'm in a council flat in Marehill in Glasgow, in a multi-storey flat. And I'm on kind of still on the dole at this time. And I've got a New York lawyer, and I'm talking to this guy in New York about all these, like Columbia and Geffen and Atlantic and all these people that want to sign the band, and we're talking about setting up a trip to New York to meet all these people, which we eventually did and met like 11 labels, and it was crazy. It was it was funny,
And this is a time where major labels are kind of snapping up guitar bands.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there was probably a period when guitar bands seemed unfashionable in the 80s when everything went kind of, who knows, I can't really remember. Yeah. But people suddenly got interested in these guys in their early mid-20s who looked like, they didn't really care, which is us. And, you're not really aware, young people aren't aware of the attractiveness of their own youth and of their own fearlessness, whatever, to more jaded people, older, suddenly, we couldn't really see it. But anyway, so anyway, I ended up as this guy with no money in a council flat, living with my mum and dad, talking to a New York lawyer. And someday we had this like rehearsal studio on the other side of Glasgow, and a lot of days I didn't have the bus fare to go to rehearsal, but I'm interacting with all this stuff. It was crazy. And I remember talking to this guy, the guy that eventually signed us to Geffen Records was a guy called Gary Gersh. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I remember he was our A&R guy. And, again, I'm in council flat. It's two different worlds. He's sitting in Geffen's office in Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, and I'm in a council flat in Maryhill in Glasgow. And I'm talking to him, and he's talking about a fax. This is maybe before we signed. We're still talking to him. I was chatting to him, and I said, and he was saying about sending a fax. I said, I don't actually have a fax machine, Gary. And Gary was kind of funny. He was classic LA, and he said to me, I won't do the accent. He's like, Raymond, you can just go out and buy one. And I'm kind of like, Gary, the reason I don't have a fax machine isn't because I'm stupid. It's because I don't have any money. I know you can buy one. It's like, but it's about 500 quid. So anyway, cut to a few months later, we all had fax machines.
Brilliant. I mean, that's the thing you read about, that if a band puts out their early on in their career, a record, maybe they don't see any money from it for 10 months or a year.
Well, I have to say, they gave us a good big wedge of cash, which was useful, because, not that we were still, I think one of the things we've always been good at as a band is we haven't ended up in the big financial hole too much. where you get some money, you spend it all, then you realise you've got tax to pay, then suddenly you go bankrupt and the band's over. We've managed to avoid that.
Great.
Because that's so many bands end that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've managed to avoid that. But, I'm not complaining. People gave us quite a lot of money in the 90s to make records, but we were still doing exactly what we wanted, certainly from creation. And, people just gave us money. We went and made records. It didn't make any difference other than the fact we had a bit more money to make a record, but nobody told us what to do. Or people might have tried to tell us what to do, but we didn't listen to anyone,
Brilliant. Well, Raymond, I don't want to hold you too long, and it's been a total pleasure to hear all these stories.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose, it's always, I think you need to be. We had this guy who was our tour manager and for a while manager, Chaz Banks, guy from Manchester, and he had, at the same time as having stories from the past, you have to be self-aware enough to not be like, oh God, here comes this old tripper with his stories from the past, because Chaz would be like, he would presage or whatever the word is. He's like, listen, boys, I don't want to give you the desert rat routine, but and then and he tell us something about so you don't want to be some boring old thing with stories about what it was like, Monty Python, oh, that was nothing. Wait till you hear what it was like back in my day. We, as I say, we've music, all these I suppose people telling each other their stories about things is just part of what people enjoy. But yeah, you need to be careful you don't tell the same story 10 times to the same person.
And just finally, talking about that and doing your own thing in the 90s and kind of being in I suppose in a fortunate position, it kind of seems to me that you've remained that way, doing your own thing, and then what happens around it is doing its own thing. Of course, the music industry has changed so much. It changes every year almost, it seems.
Yeah, I think as a band, we've just tried to maintain a constant state of bemusement with everything around us and not feel like we want to just maintain our separate bemused, like overview of everything, and everything changes around you and we just kind of look at that, that's different or whatever, but we just deal with it as around us, and we try not to whinge about anything or moan about anything or complain about anything. We just get on with it,
I suppose when you try and control things, that's going to be when things might get hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we just try to have a simple thing. We're always just thinking about the next record we do or what we're doing or how we do the details of the simple things that we do. I think where you can disappear up your own arse or whatever is getting too much of a sense of who you are or the importance of who you are, or becoming a pastiche of who you were, or getting too self-conscious about who you are or what you should do or what your strategy is or whatever, all any of that kind of stuff. We just like to we've always, as a band as well, from when we made the first record, The Catholic Education in 1989, we're like, we'll just get into the studio and make a record, then we'll go out into the world after that, as opposed to trying to create a conceptual sense of the band. We just wanted to be a band in reality and deal with the world with something that we'd done that was real, as opposed to dealing with the world as a concept or whatever.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's just kind of what we've tried to do, just make the record first and then deal with whatever the world is like when we go back out into the daylight afterwards.
And naturally those records will reflect the life, the real life elements.
Well, I mean, I think all you got to offer is of any value is a bit of yourself, and sometimes it's hard to show. You kind of have some song idea, and you think, oh, I can't do that. That's I can't. I'll change that later. To something more sensible. But then you realise, no, that's kind of whatever it is. That's it's come from somewhere, you know.
Yeah, somewhere pure.
Somewhere inside or somewhere unconscious, where anything you've got that's good comes out of your unconscious somewhere, and you have to just kind of stick your head above the parapet and show a bit of yourself, for who you are and kind of who you are now, you know. And as a band, we've always been like, well, we want to make a record about, well, it's us being us now, as we are now, you know, not as we were, you know, or in, you know, we don't want to impersonate our previous selves or whatever, you know. We just want to kind of just continue to be in the present day, you know. And people are either going to react well to that or not, but in the process of making a record, we're just trying to please ourselves.
I think it's good for everyone to be reminded of that occasionally.
Well, you know, I suppose, I don't know what about other people. We kind of like to remind ourselves of that. That's all.
Brilliant. Well, Raymond, thank you so much. I was so surprised that, you know, you're up for chatting to me, you know. So thank you so much for being up.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Charles.
So there you have it, Raymond McGinley of Teenage Fan Club here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Cheers for listening in, and see you next week. Have a good one. Here's Cock Sparrow.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.